Right then guys, it's PSL here for the 14th episode in my Formula 1 2003 Reverse Grid Race series. And we're here for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. And as you can see, Fernando Alonso is starting on pole position. That means he qualified for the real life 2003 Italian Grand Prix in last. This is just one race after the Hungarian Grand Prix where he qualified on pole position and won. He took his first ever Formula 1 race win. In real life of course, because in this series, the Hungarian Grand Prix went pretty much the completely opposite way for Alonso. He started from 20th and was the first driver to retire. The reason Alonso started from the very back of the grid for the Italian Grand Prix was because he spun out in qualifying. And that's the thing, one-shot quali, what happens happens. If you make a mistake, you've got to live with it. You've got one attempt, and unfortunately, Alonso ruined his lap. So yeah, Alonso started from the very back of the grid, now he'll be starting from pole position. And ordinarily, at this point, I would say this is a fantastic opportunity for Fernando Alonso in a Renault to get a good result. Not necessarily around any other circuit possibly, but this is Monza, a power circuit, and I've heard it mentioned, I'm not sure where exactly. It might have been in the 2003 season review DVD, it might have been from James Allen during one of the qualifying or race commentaries, but I've heard it mentioned that Renault have the best chassis on the grid. Now I know that's very similar to the comments that Red Bull and McLaren have made in recent years that they've got an amazing chassis but a lack of engine power. However, I believe it. I think it certainly is plausible that Renault could have one of the best, if not the best, chassis on the grid. They are certainly the fourth best team, way better than all the other teams behind them, but there is the impression that if they had a Ferrari engine, a Mercedes engine, a BMW engine, they would be further up towards the front. And that's the thing, this is a power circuit, and the Renault's a quick car. Overall it's fantastic, but it's lacking in power, and this is the mother of all power circuits. So Fernando Alonso from pole position, great starting position, but well, we'll see where he finishes. Certainly higher up than Justin Wilson or Ralph Furman. Now of course both of those drivers weren't actually racing in those seats for the Italian Grand Prix. Wilson was at Jaguar, and Ralph Furman, we already saw in the previous episode the crash he had in Hungary, so he was ruled out of the Hungarian Grand Prix and replaced by Zolt Baumgartner, and that carried on for this Grand Prix. So Ralph Furman did race for the final two races in the season, but Baumgartner raced in the Hungarian Grand Prix and this one, which is why Ralph Furman is starting a bit further up the grid than you would expect, and also way further up than his teammate. So then you got Verstappen, Heidfeld, Pitsonia, who of course was Justin Wilson, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, there's Giancarlo Fisichella in the other Jordan, and of course in the previous Grand Prix, Jordan did brilliantly well. But that was the Hungaroring, and this is Monza, completely different circuit. De Matter, Webber, Jacques Villeneuve, finally we have got to a BAR driver. Now that's the thing actually, in the entire second half of this season, well, I guess actually the previous Grand Prix was kind of an exception, but BAR in the second half of this season have been fantastic, and that's because their qualifying performances were quite poor for every Grand Prix in the second half of the season up till this point. That's the thing, is Jacques Villeneuve actually qualified decently well, yes, beaten by Panis and David Coulthard. But Jenson Button in the BAR beat David Coulthard in the McLaren. And yes, I know we keep saying that David Coulthard didn't qualify especially well, and this race is no exception, but it's still an achievement from Jenson Button. There's Jarno Trulli in the other Renault, way further up the grid. Then you've got Ralf Schumacher, except in real life, it wasn't Ralf Schumacher who qualified. Well, not in the second qualifying session. As I understand it, I think BMW Williams were doing some testing at Monza, some private testing just before the Italian Grand Prix, and Ralf Schumacher crashed in testing. And Ralf Schumacher actually took part in the Italian Grand Prix weekend. He took part in the first qualifying session, but then bowed out, and was replaced by Marc Genet. However, Ralf Schumacher's starting position doesn't look that strange because, well, Marc Genet, compared to Kieser and Baumgartner, who have stepped into a car mid-season, Genet's got vastly more experience, way more F1 experience. Of course, Marc Genet was a Minardi race driver, whereas Kieser and Baumgartner had never raced an F1 car prior to stepping into Minardi and Jordan respectively. I think they were both Formula 3000 drivers, whereas Genet is a out-and-out F1 driver. So Ralf Schumacher's qualifying position is broadly in the same place you would expect. Then you've got Kimi Raikkonen, Barrichello, Montoya and Michael Schumacher.
Welcome to Monza in the northern outskirts of Italy's wealthiest city, Milan. Hugely partisan crowd here. They've seen so much Ferrari success over the years. Will they see another today? Now, and we're racing up Monza. Everybody looks as though they've got away well. It's a very tight first corner into that chicane. We've had problems there in the past, and they approach it at such a huge speed. They're rushing towards it now.
Well, certainly there have been accidents as the first chicane in the past, but I think this time we've got through it by and large cleanly. So, Fernando Alonso leading the Italian Grand Prix, and what a lead he's built up already. Ralf Furman in second, Heidfeld third, Wilson fourth, Frentzen, Verstappen, Fisichella, De Matter, Jacques Villeneuve in ninth place, just outside of the final points position. Then you got Trulli, Pitsonia, Coulthard. You see, if you move towards the back, there's both Ferraris, but it won't be long before they move up towards the front, I am certain. Fernando Alonso leading the way, and what a gap he's built up already. I mean, the Renault engine is certainly lacking power, but the Ford engine in the Jordan isn't exactly great either. Neither's the chassis, neither's the aerodynamics, neither's any of it, really, to be honest. But Ralf Furman is still running in second place. Heidfeld, Justin Wilson in fourth place, courtesy largely of Nicholas Kieser's poor qualifying performance. There's Frentzen in fifth. I think we're going to see an overtake made. Heinz-Harald Frentzen with the Ferrari engine getting past Justin Wilson potentially. Well, I'm not seeing a move made to the left or the right. Whoa, Wilson's thinking about which side of the track he's going to go on. He's going to just stick in the centre, and so's Frentzen. So no overtake made there, and we've still got De Matter in 8th and Jacques Villeneuve in 9th. So no changes inside of the points places. Rubens Barrichello in 19th, and Michael Schumacher, where is he? He's in 14th, so he's moved up 6 places from where he started.
You can see he's all over the back of him like a rash, trying to find the right time.
Villeneuve has to be careful if he doesn't want to get passed by David Coulthard. McLaren's David Coulthard will have to really push if he wants to get past Villeneuve. You can see he's all over the back of the car in front, trying to find the right time to overtake.
He's right on his gearbox now.
That is completely true, Martin. That's what I don't understand. I don't see how much closer David Coulthard wants to get before he attempts a move. I mean, just look at the gap on board. That's the gap between David Coulthard and Jacques Villeneuve. There's been no overtakes in the top 10 all race. 5 laps done and not a single overtake in the entire top half of the field. This is Monza. I can't believe I'm saying this. This is Monza and there's been no overtakes. This is ridiculous.
Frentzen really wants to get past Justin Wilson.
Well, you could have fooled me because I don't think Frentzen wants to get past Justin Wilson, because he hasn't tried to at all. Well, let's just have a look at this. Heading down towards the Rettifilio chicane down the start-finish straight, he's got a one-year-old Ferrari engine, he's in a Sauber, slipstream, nothing. Not even the vaguest attempt at a manoeuvre. Mid-race sit rep. Fernando Alonso is dominating, completely dominating this Grand Prix. Fastest lap after fastest lap, it's ridiculous. Ralf Furman, I think genuinely, is marginally quicker than Nick Heidfeld. Ralf Furman's still in second, Heidfeld's still in third. They're a fair way ahead of Justin Wilson, who's in fourth, still. Then it's Heinz-Harald Frentzen in fifth, although I would be worried if I was Frentzen, because the last time Frentzen was stuck behind a backmarker driver in fifth place, his engine blew up. That's the thing, no one's retired, no one. I mean, sometimes I don't show retirements if it's for a driver who's down the back end of the grid, but last time I saw, no one retired. Verstappen's still in sixth, and that's Fisichella, De Matter, Villeneuve. Look how close Coulthard is to the back of Villeneuve's car, and there's nothing. No attempt at a move, no dummy, no dive to the inside, going around the outside, no late braking, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Well, let's have another look. I mean, you've got this massive string of cars, and it's the most processional race I have ever seen.
One. It's a fastest lap by Renault's Fernando Alonso. David Coulthard has bettered his time through sector 1.
David Coulthard is getting ready to try and pass Villeneuve.
Coulthard is faster than he's been before in sector 2.
You can see he's all over the back of the car in front, trying to find the right time to overtake.
The fastest lap of the race was just set by Fernando Alonso.
Well, that doesn't surprise me one bit, because everyone else is in traffic, apart from Ralf Furman and Justin Wilson, and they're not going to be able to compete with Fernando Alonso. And anyway, both of those drivers are worried about defending their place. Alonso isn't. I mean, it's telling us the gap between Alonso and Ralf Schumacher, presumably because Alonso is closer to Ralf Schumacher than he is to Ralf Furman. The only reason I'm showing you the final 2 laps is because, well, if I don't, then this video is going to be incredibly short. Nothing, absolutely nothing has happened all race. It's been a procession. That is not an exaggeration. That's the truth. Certainly, if you exclude the first 1.5 laps, that's all that's happened. I mean, let's just have a rundown of the entire grid. Alonso, Furman. Furman has still got a sizable gap over Heidfeld. I genuinely think Furman is slightly quicker than Heidfeld. Heidfeld third, then it's Wilson, Frentzen, Verstappen, Fisichella, De Matter, Villeneuve, Coulthard. It's the same top 10. Jarno Trulli in 11th, then Kimi Räikkönen in 12th. Pitsonia in 13th. Michael Schumacher is still in 14th. That's where he was 16 laps ago. Montoya, Webber, Panis, Button, Barrichello in 19th. Ralf Schumacher is still in 20th. No one's retired. There's been no action all Grand Prix. Well, as I said, apart from the first 1.5 laps. And even then, that's a slight exaggeration. The first lap, definitely something happened. We saw more action in Monaco, vastly more action in the Hungarian Grand Prix. Even the San Marino Grand Prix, which is probably the only race all season which played to the backmarker teams, well, until this one. Even the San Marino Grand Prix had more action than this one. Look, Ralf Schumacher in traffic is about 3 seconds a lap slower than Fernando Alonso. Well, it's been the most boring reverse grid race ever, which in of itself is interesting, but Fernando Alonso absolutely dominated. Fernando Alonso has won the Italian Grand Prix, and it was never in doubt. As long as his car didn't blow up like in the Hungarian Grand Prix. Ralf Furman is going to take a comfortable second place, I feel. Ralph Furman in a Jordan, the only other Grand Prix which really played to Jordan, well the Hungarian Grand Prix just so happened to, was the San Marino Grand Prix. Even the Monaco one didn't. There were loads of overtakes in Monaco. Well, both Ferrari drivers made up a lot of places in Monaco, even if no one else did. Ralph Furman has finished in second around Monza. Nick Heidfeld has taken the final podium place. Justin Wilson has come across the line in 4th, Heinz Frentzen in 5th, Jos Verstappen in 6th, Fizzy Keller in 7th. It's another double points finish for Jordan, and Cristiano Di Matta in 8th. So that was the Italian Grand Prix, and honestly, I'm speechless. Although, to be fair, there is nothing to talk about from this race. Fernando Alonso, fantastic race result to win the Grand Prix. He absolutely dominated it. Ralph Furman drove brilliantly to take 2nd place. That is a fantastic race result for him and the Jordan team. I mean, yes, you could argue that that race result was effectively gifted to him based on his starting position, but you can't really blame Ralph Furman for the lack of overtaking action during this race. And I guess that's what annoys me the most. The Monaco, Hungarian and San Marino Grand Prix all had way more action than this one, vastly more. And I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case, but in the final 16 laps of this race, I don't think a single overtake was made. Not one. And I'm not just talking about inside the top 8 or inside the top 10. I genuinely don't think in the final 16 laps of this 18 lap race, a single overtake across all 20 positions was made. And it's not just a lack of overtakes, but no one even attempted to overtake another driver. There was never a dummy manoeuvre, a look left or right, a dive up the inside, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm trying to remember back to the 2002 reverse grid Italian Grand Prix. Now, I think Nick Heidfeld won that race, so there must have been a slight drought in overtaking during that race, again for whatever reason. But during that race, from memory, I think Michael Schumacher crashed, he finished in last, and he won the Drivers' Championship. I know that's for a fact because I had to re-record that line. Yeah, that video really wasn't a good one. Well, I don't like any of my older videos, well, most of them. In the here and now, this Italian Grand Prix was boring, completely boring. You, luckily, didn't watch all of it. I did. I mean, there are 8 different engine manufacturers in 2003. 8 different engine manufacturers: Ferrari, BMW, Mercedes, Honda, Toyota, Cosworth, Renault and Ford. 8 different engine manufacturers. Actually, it's more complicated than that because there's 9 engine marks. Because Sauber, yes, they run a Ferrari engine, but it's badged Petronas and is a 1-year-old Ferrari engine. So that's 9 completely different engines. Actually, it's really 10 because Jaguar and Minardi both run Cosworth engines, but Minardi run a much older, less upgraded, less advanced Cosworth engine. Jaguar run a much better model, so realistically there are 10 quite different engines being used by 10 different teams. The disparity in power output across all those engines being used by all those teams must be quite wide. And this was a power circuit, Monza, with all those long high-speed straights, many of which enter slow-speed corners. Yet, not a single overtake was made. I am truly baffled. The real-life 2003 Italian Grand Prix has the record for being the highest average speed Formula 1 race. Now that record wasn't beaten in this reverse grid Grand Prix, but the real-life 2003 Italian Grand Prix also has the record for being the shortest Grand Prix not to be red flagged. Now you can't really compare the reverse grid Grand Prix to the real-life Grand Prix because in this reverse grid series we're running at about a third of the normal race distance. But it is funny how what was meant to be the shortest Grand Prix felt like the longest. So into the Drivers' Championship, and there's absolutely no change at the front. Rubens Barrichello is still 8 points ahead of Michael Schumacher, and Michael Schumacher is still 8 points ahead of David Coulthard. So actually this Grand Prix worked out to the benefit of Rubens Barrichello. Yeah, sure, he didn't score any points, but neither did any of his championship rivals, which means his championship lead is still as big as it ever was, and there's fewer races for it to be closed down. So much so that Montoya and Kimi Räikkönen are now officially out of championship contention. David Coulthard 16 points back, with only 20 points maximum up for grabs. I do think the championship battle is going to go down between both Ferrari drivers, and honestly, I think Barrichello's going to win it. Fernando Alonso is the only driver who started in the top half of the championship heading into this race to have scored points. So he's overtaken his teammate Jarno Trulli, and further on down the field where there's been quite a bit of movement, Ralf Schumacher is now in the bottom half of the Drivers' Championship. That's just embarrassing. Montoya, up until the end of this Grand Prix, was a Drivers' Championship contender. Ralf Schumacher is now in the bottom half. Nick Heidfeld overtook him, as did Jos Verstappen. Giancarlo Fisichella caught up to Ralf Schumacher, Justin Wilson overtook Giancarlo Fisichella, Ralph Furman overtook Mark Webber, and that's it actually. Cristiano Di Matta has stayed in the same position. Actually, well, I don't think he has actually, because I think Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who was bottom in the Drivers' Championship, he's overtaken Panis and Pitsonia for sure. He's now tied on points with Di Matta, and I think Heinz-Harald Frentzen has overtaken Di Matta based on race finishes. I'm not entirely sure of that, but Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who has been slumped at the bottom of the Drivers' Championship for a long time now, is nowhere near the bottom actually. Panis Pitsonia and potentially even Di Matta separate himself from the bottom. So actually this was a very successful race for Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and certainly without a shadow of a doubt for Sauber. Sauber scored 10 points. But do you know what? So did Renault, because of course Fernando Alonso won the Grand Prix, but Jordan also scored 10 points. So Sauber didn't actually close up to Jordan. And Jordan barely closed up to Minardi because Minardi scored 8 points. Let me just reiterate this. The only teams that scored points are Renault, and actually Renault overtook Williams, but there's only 1 point separating those two teams. So Renault overtook Williams, and that is the only positional change. Minardi scored 8 points, Jordan scored 10, Sauber scored 10, and even Toyota, who are bottom of the Constructors' Championship, scored another point for the second race in a row. They've scored 4 points in the past 2 races, and they're still bottom in the Constructors' Championship. I mean, Toyota, they haven't had an amazing season, but 4 points in the past 2 races, that really does scream as to how beneficial the past 2 races were for the backmarker teams, and actually, in a way, how similar they were. Monza and Hungaroring, 2 completely different circuits, but both of them, to varying extents, were beneficial for the backmarker teams, because Sauber, Jordan and Toyota scored points in both Grand Prix. Minardi scored points in this one. Renault overtook Williams, which in 2003 is, well, that's an underdog beating an established top 3 team. Strange, incredibly strange. Well, that was the Italian Grand Prix. Nothing else to say. Truly, it was a boring Grand Prix, but interesting, if you get what I mean. Nothing happened. There was no action, no retirements, no overtaking, nothing. Well, beyond the first lap. But it was interesting. It was interesting because it was boring. Anyway, the next Grand Prix is the American Grand Prix at Indianapolis. And that circuit has certainly hosted some Formula 1 races which are interesting because they're boring. Case in point, the 2005 American Grand Prix. Well, hopefully Indianapolis can throw up a few more overtakes than Monza could. Regardless, I'll see you guys in the next episode for the second to last race in this season.